Not every downfall begins with rebellion. Some begin in the quiet corners of the heart, with a whisper, a longing, a moment of, "Why not me?" This is the story of Gehazi, the man who stood close to God's miracles but was undone by a secret hunger for more. He was not a stranger to the supernatural. He stood next to a prophet, not just any prophet, but Elisha, the miracle worker, the one who inherited the mantle of Elijah himself. Gehazi was more than a servant. He was a witness to the wonders of God. He wasn't watching from a distance. He was in the room when dead children breathed again, when oil flowed endlessly from jars, when barren women gave birth. He saw the impossible become real. Daily. Gehazi knew the weight of a prophet's staff. He carried it. He prayed with it. He had purpose. But slowly, quietly, his heart began to change. The miracles were no longer enough. God's presence was no longer his treasure. He walked beside the presence of power. Yet something in his heart was empty. Gehazi didn't start out as a villain. He started out chosen, trusted. He stood in the shadow of divine authority. He carried the prophet's staff. He was close, so close, to greatness. But being near God's power is not the same as walking in God's fear. Because somewhere along the way, ambition started whispering, "You deserve more. Why should they have it and not you? No one will know." And one moment, one silent agreement with greed would write his legacy. Gehazi carried Elisha's staff, stood at the door of miracles, but deep inside, something began to shift. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. Gehazi's heart slowly drifted, not toward the presence of God, but toward possessions. This is not just a tale of ancient times. It's a warning to all of us who walk near God, who serve in the house of the Lord, who bear his name, but still wrestle with hidden desires. Join us as we explore the rise and fall of Gehazi, a man who stood beside miracles, but chose silver instead of surrender. Then came Naaman, a man of power, prestige, and disease, a commander of the Syrian army but covered in leprosy. Naaman, a Syrian military commander, powerful, wealthy, revered, but beneath the armor and medals, a secret shame. Leprosy, a disease that stripped dignity from even the strongest. Desperate for healing, Naaman traveled far to meet Elisha. He came to Israel not with swords, but with silver, with wealth, honor, and a desperate plea, "Please heal me." And God, in his mercy, gave him an answer that sounded foolish to human ears. Elisha didn't even come to the door. He simply sent a message, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and you will be clean." No special potion, no grand ceremony, just obedience. At first, Naaman was angry. Aren't the rivers in Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? But his servants urged him, "If the prophet had asked you to do something difficult, wouldn't you have done it? How much more then when he simply says, 'Wash and be clean'?" Naaman obeyed. He dipped once, twice, 3 times, and on the 7th time, his diseased skin was gone. His body was restored like that of a young child. He was healed, transformed, redeemed. Naaman obeyed, and the impossible happened. His skin was restored, clean, whole. Not only was his body healed, but his heart was changed. Overcome with gratitude, Naaman returned to Elisha's home. In gratitude, he returned to Elisha with treasures, silver, gold, fine garments. He brought with him 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of fine garments. He said, "Please accept the gift from your servant." But Elisha, unmoved by riches, replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing." He would not allow God's miracle to be cheapened into a transaction. Naaman was healed by grace, not payment. But someone was watching from the shadows. Gehazi. And something inside him stirred. The servant, the witness, the man who stood beside power, but now stood beside temptation, and temptation sounded like opportunity. My master was too soft, he thought. We deserve something from this rich foreigner. Doesn't he know what we could do with that wealth? Doesn't he see the opportunity we just let slip by? The voice of greed began to drown out the voice of obedience. He waited, he watched, he schemed, and then he ran. Breathless but determined, Gehazi caught up to Naaman. Naaman saw him and stepped down in concern. Is everything all right? Gehazi smiled and lied. Yes, everything's fine, but my master sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets have just arrived. He would like a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothes for them. Naaman, still in the joy of his healing, insisted, please take 2 talents. He even sent servants to carry the gifts for Gehazi. And once they reached a hill, Gehazi took the silver and garments and hid them in his house. Not for ministry, not for the poor, but for himself. When he returned to Elisha, the prophet asked, Where have you been, Gehazi? And with a straight face, Gehazi said, Nowhere, sir. But Elisha's eyes, sharpened by the Spirit of God, saw far beyond the surface. His voice changed, no longer gentle, but filled with divine authority. Was not my spirit with you when the man stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money, or clothes, or vineyards and flocks, or servants? He paused. The leprosy that clung to Naaman will now cling to you, and your descendants forever. And at that very moment, Gehazi's skin turned white, leprous as snow. He walked out of the prophet's house carrying silver and robes, but losing far more: his calling, his inheritance, his legacy. How does a man so close to God fall so far? It didn't begin with silver. It began when proximity to God became familiar, routine, ordinary. It began when his eyes turned from heaven's glory to earth's treasure. Gehazi reminds us of a deep truth. Being around God's power is not the same as being surrendered to God's will. You can carry a prophet's staff and still carry sin in your heart. You can serve in ministry and still chase personal gain. You can be near the altar and yet far from God. The story of Gehazi is not just a warning about greed. It's a call to examine our hearts, to ask, why am I following Jesus? For him or for what I can gain? Do I serve for applause, for promotion, or from a pure heart? Because in the end, silver fades, but God's call is eternal. So friend, don't trade your calling for silver. Don't bury God's presence beneath the garments of greed. Stay faithful, stay clean, stay close to him. If this story moved you, share it, like and subscribe for more truth-filled stories that speak to your heart and soul. And remember, what God has for you is far greater than what the world can ever offer.